Well, Margaret Mitchell Faiver is on the line. It's a return visit. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just great, Toby, and you?
Very well, thank you. Now, Margaret is, of course, an author whose stories span the genres of mysteries, historical fiction, and what she's coined as historical horror. So how would you describe what historical horror is?
Well, let me put it this way, Toby. I love to read about historical figures and then
Yeah.
imagine what horror could have occurred in their life. Maupassant, for one, the ghost of Maupassant is one of my stories, and I had an absolute ball writing that one in many different formats, and I've done others, but that's
Yeah.
one I treasure.
And these historical people, do you get inspiration from their own real life and things that actually happened?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's anyone who reads one of my stories would, in fact, be able to verify the facts that happened,
Yeah.
aside from the fact that they may take a very macabre turn.
And what kind of macabre turns do they tend to take? I mean, how dramatic and horrific do they get?
Pretty horrific, I have to tell you. It's amazing to me sometimes, and those who know me, that my mind goes in that direction, but it does.
Yeah.
One example would be Maupassant, of course, was a writer and a protege of Flaubert. And in fact, he was committed to an asylum in the end of his life and did try to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Well, I turned his writings into a work of the devil.
Wow.
And actually had it go through time and into the future on the ink from his pen.
Yeah. And do you particularly like to find out about female historical figures, given that you've written your book Running from Her Feet, and a lot of what you tend to talk about and write about is to do with women's issues?
It doesn't necessarily have to be female figures, although I am quite fond of weaving Kate Chopin into my macabre tales or Virginia Woolf. But in fact, Toby, I really enjoy any historical figures. And I, what can I say? You just never know who's going to show up in some of the stories that I write.
Yeah.
You might, Toby. You might.
I hope not to be a historical figure quite yet. But what is the process for choosing who is going to be in it? Is it completely random, or does there have to be a reason behind it?
No, I really think I'm probably led more, Jacoby, from literature because that is my passion and that was my academic studies. And in fact, I'm really drawn to literary figures of the past and of the present and see how I can weave them into my stories.
Now, the last time you were on, we were talking about your book, Running from Her Feet. I think it's maybe important to remind people what the story is about there.
The story is about 3 generations of women that are affected by something horrific that happened to the biological mother back in the early 20th century, and how that actually played out in the lives of her daughter and granddaughter.
What would you say were the things that inspired you to write that book?
Well, there were many things that inspired me to write it. I think all writers, Toby, draw from their own lives. They draw from experiences that they've had, their friends have had, family members, but also society in general. And we are in a time of, well, I'm going to turn it awakening for women and the struggles that women have faced throughout their lives and continue to meet those challenges.
So what kind of things are we awakening to right now, do you think?
I think women are finding their voice. They always had a voice, possibly, but it was suppressed and they were not free to say, hey, this happened to me. It was a shame to be raped, not a tragedy. It was a shame to be abused, not a tragedy. Women were put in a box where they had to protect if it was their husband or a financial provider in some way. They had to actually keep their mouths shut and just bear up. Now they can speak, Toby, and they are speaking. And there's freedom in that, and there's justice in that, Toby.
Is this partly because of the Me Too movement, or do you think it would have happened anyway?
No, I think it's part of the Me Too, but and I'll just say this very briefly. I also think that recent political events inspired women to once again embrace upon what I term the third wave of the feminist movement, and hopefully it will continue.
If it's the political event I'm thinking of, do you think that's had such a big impact to call it a third wave? Because I guess in America it must be huge.
It's a huge thing in America, and it's actually worked both for women and against women. Women are, in fact, in some states losing their rights and being inspired to continue to fight. I didn't expect that there would be a step backward or two. There has been. But women have not given up. And just like their ancestors fought in the late 19th century, the early 20th century, they now have to pick up the gauntlet and fight again in the 21st century.
Just for balance, those who want to ban abortion or make it limited or whatever aren't doing it because they want to curtail women's rights. They're doing it because of other beliefs, aren't they?
They are, and absolutely. And everyone is entitled to their own beliefs. But there are, what shall I say, Toby, women who are in circumstances where actually they have to have the right to make the decision about what they do. And it cannot be legislated by somebody who's not involved personally with that woman, who may have experienced rape and is pregnant, or may have experienced incest through no fault of her own and is pregnant. And in those circumstances, I strongly believe a woman's right to choose is inherent.
Now, you're planning to have your own blog as well about the history of feminist writers.
I am. And I think I'll probably begin the blog, and I really should be doing it already, but I'm afraid I've already caught up in the next novel. I mean, here we go. But I think what I'll begin it with is a study of Kate Stillpan's novel, The Awakening. Certainly, I'll touch on Virginia Woolf, and there will, in fact, be some male authors in there and writers as far back as the Greeks who gave women power, and I'd like to address those.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
I know.
You mentioned that you're getting caught up writing your new book. What can you tell us about it, if anything?
It's actually a continuation of this novel.
Ooh.
What can I tell you? The investigative nature that Hope has is passed down to one of her nieces, who takes over the business and is in fact investigating another case. So a mystery.
Do you kind of like writing all sorts of different genres?
I do. I really do. I mean, I certainly like the short stories that I write, but I'm also someone right now who sort of I'm enjoying writing this mystery novel. You know, once you get the first novel out of the way, then you've sort of got a path and you can move forward with it. And this one's going a lot faster than the first one did.
And what else is coming up for you? Do you have plans for even more books at all?
I think I'll finish the second novel. Certainly there could be others that follow suit in this, because it's that type of a thread. It's a literary thread that certainly there's, no end to mystery novels. One can continue on. But short stories, I'm also possibly thinking of doing a flash fiction on one of Foster's Canterbury Tales. So you never know where I'm going to go, Toby.
Yeah. And this book, of course, Running from Her Feet, was your debut one. Have you found that you've got in the swing of it?
Yes. I do feel I'm in the swing of it, and I hope to turn out many more books. Yes.
Yeah. Well, where are we able to find your book, Running from Her Feet, and your blog when it launches, and all your other books?
Sure. You can find Running from Her Feet and my other short fat book, Daughter of Rosalia, on Amazon.com. Running from Her Feet is also on Barnes & Noble, and you can check out my work and my history and eventually find the blog on MargaretMitchellFaiver.com.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for talking to us today, and have a great 2023.
And the same to you, Toby. Take care.